Hello, this is Jina Kim, host of the GEOVISTA. As the world order faces renewed turbulence following the re-election of former U.S. President Donald Trump, Japan's Liberal Democratic Party has narrowly retained power, with Shigeru Ishiba re-elected as Prime Minister. However, from the very beginning, the Ishiba cabinet faces concerns of becoming a lame duck government. Today, on the GEOVISTA, we'll closely examine the uncertain trajectory of Japanese politics and the potential implications for the alliance between South Korea, U.S., and Japan. First, let's take a closer look at Japan's LDP and Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. Join me, Jina Kim, as we head to Japan. On October 1st, Shigeru Ishiba, leader of the Liberal Democratic Party, was inaugurated as the 102nd Prime Minister of Japan. However, just 8 days later, Japan's House of Representatives was dissolved.
日本国憲法第7条により衆議院を解散する。
It is because Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba had promised to dissolve the House of Representatives immediately after being elected as the leader of the Liberal Democratic Party.
新政権はできる限り早期に国民の審判を受けることが重要である。10月27日に解散総選挙を行い、
His intention was to solidify his political legitimacy through the dissolution and subsequent general election, and to secure public support for his policy agenda. In essence, it was a bold political gamble. However, the outcome was far from favorable. The Liberal Democratic Party, under Prime Minister Ishiba's leadership, suffered a crushing defeat in the House of Representatives election held on October 27th. In Japan's House of Representatives election, equivalent to a general election, the ruling Liberal Democratic Party not only failed to secure a majority on its own, but also fell short of achieving a majority even in coalition with its partner, Komeito. This marks the first time in 15th year since 2009 that the two parties have failed to achieve a coalition majority. Moreover, with the reorganization of the House of Representatives, a new prime minister had to be elected. Under Japan's constitution, within 30 days of a House of Representatives election, the incumbent cabinet must resign en masse, and the formation of a new cabinet and the election of a prime minister must take place. On November 11th, the election for Japan's 103rd prime minister was held. For the first time in 30 years, the election went to a runoff in the House of Representatives, with Shigeru Ishiba barely securing re-election. Now, governing may become increasingly difficult without support from the opposition. Prime Minister Ishiba highlighted the following as one of the key reasons for the Liberal Democratic Party's defeat.
いろんな理由はあったにせよ、記載をすることがなかった。そのことの責任は我々自由民主党が負わねばなりません。あらゆるご批判も浴びねばなりません。
Every year, LDP lawmakers held political fundraising parties, selling tickets to individuals, corporations, and organizations. The controversy arose from the practice of assigning ticket sales quotas to lawmakers. If a lawmaker sold more tickets than their quota, the excess amount was returned to them. For example, if lawmaker A was assigned a $50,000 quota but sold $100,000 worth of tickets, the $50,000 surplus would be returned to them. It was discovered that some lawmakers had failed to report these returned funds in their political accounts and instead used them as personal slush funds. At the time, the Special Investigation Unit of the Tokyo District Public Prosecutor's Office seized accounting records from the LDP lawmakers, arresting and prosecuting several sitting lawmakers and their accounting managers. The scandal made a severe blow to public trust in the LDP and amplified dissatisfaction with the deeply rooted factionalism within the party. As of early 2024, 6 major factions existed within the LDP. Although 5 of them dissolved in response to the public outrage, it wasn't enough to appease the public. Founded in 1955, Japan's Liberal Democratic Party has rarely lost its position as the ruling party, with the exception of a brief 5-year period. As a result, Japan's political system has been less about competition between ruling and opposition parties and more about the internal dynamics within the LDP itself. These factions, formed around key LDP figures, have continuously perpetuated cycles of rivalry and collaboration, ensuring the party's long-term dominance. Shinzo Abe, known for his strong conservative stance, led the LDP's largest faction, the Abe faction, previously known as the Hosoda faction. Under Abe's leadership, the faction reinforced a conservative party agenda. Fumio Kishida, on the other hand, was the leader of the Kishida faction, which leaned toward a moderate approach. The faction emphasized dialogue and international cooperation, advocating for a relatively pacifist foreign policy. Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has been known for representing reformist and non-mainstream voices within Japanese politics, having previously led the Ishiba faction. Since the faction's dissolution in 2021, he has operated without any factional affiliation. In foreign and security affairs, Ishiba emphasized a moderate and cooperative approach. Domestically, however, he is recognized as a strong advocate for enhancing Japan's defense capabilities. He has identified constitutional revision and the legalization of the self-defense forces as key issues, arguing that Article 9, Clause 2, which prohibits the possession of war potential, contradicts the existence of the SDF and should be removed. Additionally, Ishiba has proposed the creation of an Asia version of NATO and sharing of U.S. nuclear weapons, triggering significant debates. Prime Minister Ishiba is currently grappling with significant challenges in advancing his policy agenda. The LDP's failure to secure a majority in the recent election has weakened its parliamentary control, and the party's poor performance is being viewed as a reflection of his leadership. Compounding these internal issues are external factors, such as the inauguration of a new U.S. administration under Donald Trump, which introduces additional uncertainties. It remains to be seen how Prime Minister Ishiba and the LDP will navigate these internal challenges and adapt to the evolving international landscape. Earlier, we examined the structure of Japan's Liberal Democratic Party and the political tendencies of Prime Minister Ishiba. Now, with leadership changes unfolding in both Japan and the U.S., we will look into what these shifts could mean for the U.S.-Japan alliance and trilateral cooperation between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan. Joining us in the studio is Professor Erik Mobrand, a distinguished scholar at Seoul National University's Graduate School of International Studies. Professor Mobrand, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, let's first talk about U.S.-Japan relations. It's been known that the former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was the foreign leader that President Trump most frequently met during his terms. So considering the personalities of President Trump and also Prime Minister Ishiba, do you think they can build similar bond together?
Trump and Abe had some rapport, didn't they? I think, though, it's not so much a matter of personality. The United States and Japan are allies after all, and they're going to remain so. I think their relationship will be close, regardless of who is the president in the United States or the prime minister in Japan. Furthermore, I think that we have some similarities between Biden and Trump in the way that they approach their allies in this part of the world. There has emerged a tendency to look at South Korea and Japan through the lens of China skepticism. Yes. We've seen this both with Biden and with Trump. There is an understanding, I think, in Washington that, well, there's a decision that China is a rival to the United States, and there's an assumption that South Korea and Japan share concerns about China with the United States. So I think we can expect some continuity in terms of a close relationship between Washington and Tokyo. My own hope would be that there would be some questioning of the assumption in Washington about the perceptions that South Korea and Japan have of China. The viewpoint from this part of the world is, after all, a bit different than it is from the United States. The economy, for example, is different. South Korea's economy relates in a particular way to China's economy that's not the same as the way that the United States economy relates to China. And so I would hope there would be some consideration of the different expectations and perspectives we have in South Korea and Japan about China as this relationship in the new administrations forms.
Yes, but still there seems to be some anxiety about potential change. Obviously, during the Biden administration, the U.S. has been facilitating all the multilateral cooperation in this region, and Japan obviously has played a key role in this regard. However, President-elect Trump prefers bilateral cooperation rather than multilateral cooperation. So will that have any impact on Japan's role in this region?
There could be some impact. The different style that Trump has to international affairs from Biden or many other figures in the United States could have some impact. My sense, though, is there is not quite as much at stake in the security relationship in East Asia in relation to that particular partnership between the United States and Japan compared to other sorts of factors. I think there are other sources of change that could bring more acute or deeper problems. These would include things like, what is the purpose of having American forces in Korea? Historically, we've known that the purpose is about defending South Korea against any aggression from North Korea. But there are increasing questions about, is it actually partly to defend against possible expansion from China? If so, there are relatively large implications for the United States' security relationship with South Korea and with this region. There are other big sources of possible change in the security landscape as well. Another would be the possibility that conflicts or tension in other parts of the world spills over to the Korean Peninsula. We can think about the Taiwan Strait. What happens if there is conflict there? That will have big implications for South Korea. We have no clarity as of now on where U.S. forces in Korea go if there is a conflict on the Taiwan Strait. And again, that has an impact on South Korea's defense situation. And now, with the possibility of North Korean troops in Russia's war in Ukraine, this suggests a possible linkage between that conflict and inter-Korean relations. So I think there are a number of these possible sources of really serious change in the security landscape in East Asia. And I think that ongoing discussions between Japan and the US with Seoul play a rather minor role compared to some of these other factors.
Now then you talk about security cooperation and military posture in this region. Let me ask you this, because it was reported that the Prime Minister Ishiba mentioned Asian version of NATO. But considering President-elect Trump's preference of bilateral relations and his skepticism about alliance systems like NATO. Well, people are questioning about the feasibility of this idea. What's your perspective?
It's a big idea, isn't it? Since the middle of the 20th century, we've had these separate security arrangements for the United States on the Atlantic versus on the Pacific. We get the collective security agreements on the Atlantic, and then we have these bilateral alliances on the Pacific. So suggesting a shift to a collective agreement like NATO would signal a major historic change. It's true, Trump likes to play down multilateralism. He prefers the one-on-one negotiation. I would point out that also fits within a larger, rather unfortunate trend actually, of multilateralism declining globally, of the US role in multilateral institutions such as the United Nations also declining. So I think it's not all down to the prior Trump administration and the upcoming one. At the same time, during that first Trump administration, we had new ways of talking about American partners in this region. There was a surge in discussion of Indo-Pacific. And the Indo-Pacific imaginary of this region does put countries together into a kind of collective, at least rhetorically. So there is a kind of multilateral way of thinking about this region, even if there are not the kinds of institutions to support it from the Trump perspective. All of that said, I think it would be a major historic leap to go from these bilateral alliances to some multilateral alliance system. I see very few benefits for many of the individual partners, and I think there would also be a lot of resistance at a social level in particular countries. So I'm skeptical that something would come of this sort of initiative.
Yeah, of course. Actually, one of the serious issues debated in South Korea is obviously cost sharing these days after the election in November. So there are concerns among South Koreans about the increase of demands from the U.S. And also Japan is contributing to stationing of U.S. forces on its soil. So I'm just wondering if there's any similar concerns within the Japanese society about the demands and cost sharing from the U.S.
This is certainly an important issue. I think given how Trump has spoken in the past and more recently, I think it is reasonable to expect the possibility that his administration would raise the question of greater cost sharing with Japan or with South Korea on those countries' own defenses. And I think this raises very serious questions for each of these countries. For South Korea, would this pose some vulnerabilities to South Korean defense? Or is it in some way an opportunity to have greater discretion over how the country devises its defense strategy? How do we deal with the nuclear umbrella? How do we deter North Korea? There are really profound questions that emerge once we're faced with this question. So I expect that in the coming weeks, we will see a lot more debate within South Korea, within Japan as well, on this question, because these countries need to be prepared in the event that there are requests for greater cost sharing.
I'm sure we are on the same page on that regard. Then let's talk about personal relations between the leaders in Japan and South Korea. It's been said that President Yoon and former Prime Minister Kishida met 12 times personally. So how do you envision the personal relations between President Yoon and Prime Minister Ishiba in the coming months and years?
Again, I would be rather doubtful that these sorts of relationships come down to personality. I think we have every indication from Seoul that the current administration here is keen on hearing what Tokyo has to say on a variety of matters. And so I anticipate that there will be continued trips and consultations with Japan.
Yeah, of course. And I'm also curious about Japan's position on North Korea. There has been reports about Japan's engagement with North Korea in the coming months. And President-elect Trump also mentioned re-engagement with North Korea as well. So there can be, very interesting moment where all the leaders will meet the leader of North Korea soon. Could Prime Minister Ishiba will consider meeting with Kim Jong-un, and he may have some, momentum if President-elect Trump re-engages with North Korea after all.
It's a moment with lots of tensions, both on the peninsula in terms of U.S.-China rivalry, with the Russian war in Ukraine, and now Korean Peninsula linkages to that. It's a tough time for negotiations. That said, I think there is some possibility that the United States and Japan would take the lead on trying to open up negotiations or some sort of discussion with Pyongyang. South Korea has been focused elsewhere recently. The focus has been more on making threats to North Korea rather than finding a pathway toward peace. So I think there is a real possibility that we could see Japan and the United States taking a lead in shaping inter-Korean relations. My own view is that we would hope that South Korea would play a leading role in shaping inter-Korean affairs. For the moment, it looks like South Korea is a little bit on the sidelines of those possible future discussions.
Then what kind of issue that should be discussed between North Korea and Japan if there is any meeting between the two leaders?
If Japan is interested in having dialogue with North Korea, and I think the calculation is a bit different given the changed domestic political situation in Japan relative to some months ago. But if there is a real interest in Japan in holding some sort of discussion with North Korea, then it needs to be as open as possible. If it starts with conditions about denuclearization, then it is unlikely to go anywhere. If it starts with conditions about dealing with abductees, then it goes nowhere. So if there is a real interest in leading to a different situation, then I think it's going to need to be a rather open conversation with a goal toward achieving some sort of stability in the area.
Thank you very much for your insights. With the recent leadership change in the U.S. and Japan, it remains to be seen whether trilateral cooperation between U.S., Japan, and South Korea will evolve. We hope to have a strong bond between the three countries in the coming years. Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much for having me.
Before we wrap up the GeoVista, let's take a look at some key moments from around the world through images. President Yoon, U.S. President Joe Biden, and Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba held a trilateral summit on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation meeting. With the second Trump administration set to begin, concerns are mounting over the future of multilateral frameworks. During the summit, the leaders discussed the establishment of a trilateral cooperation office. However, questions remain as to whether such trilateral cooperation meetings will persist beyond 2025. The next image shows Japan's Emperor Naruhito delivering a speech at the opening ceremony of the 215th extraordinary session of the National Diet in Tokyo, with attendees listening in solemn silence. The Emperor's speech at the opening of the Diet is a long-standing tradition, symbolizing the official start of a parliamentary proceedings. Events involving the Emperor are held with the highest level of formality, with politicians traditionally wearing tailcoats as part of protocol. China's next-generation stealth fighter and Russia's latest fighter jet were unveiled for the first time at the 15th Zhuhai airshow. This event, a major showcase for China's advanced weaponry, drew particular attention with the presence of Sergei Shoigu, Secretary of Russia's Security Council. The airshow highlighted China's status as the first nation to operate two types of stealth fighters, signaling substantial advancement in its military capabilities. Moreover, it demonstrated the growing collaboration between Moscow and Beijing, emphasizing their closer ties in the aftermath of Russia's war in Ukraine. This display is expected to draw considerable attention from nations sensitive to shifts in the global balance of power. This is Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang and SoftBank Group CEO Masayoshi Son in conversation at an AI event held in Tokyo. The two CEOs, who have built a long-standing partnership, shared a warm and engaging dialogue during a fireside chat. Combining the strength of Nvidia's cutting-edge AI technology and SoftBank's advancement in 5G, their partnership is expected to generate new business opportunities. This partnership is also anticipated to play a significant role in positioning Japan as a global leader in AI-driven technological and industrial innovation. We'll be back next time with even more in-depth coverage. Thank you for joining us. This has been Jina Kim for the GeoVista.